Chores at the Cottage. The autumn after Nightmare Night. In the weeks after her first Nightmare Night visit to Ponyville, Princess Luna found herself spending more and more time in Ponyville with the bearers. At Sweet Apple Acres, Luna spent several nights under the moon with Applejack, assisting with the autumn harvest. Although slim, Luna could buck an apple tree just as well as Big Mac. In the crisp night air, she listened to Applejack hold forth on the last 1,000 years' advances in agronomy and air magic. It was sadly the magic resonance of the Princess of the Night on those trees that would attract the vampire fruit bats that next summer. Luna's visit to Rarity started with a discussion of modern fabrics, turned into a discussion of the year's fashions at court. Luna had watched the Grand Galloping Gala from the dark balcony and remembered every gown, but then turned to a discussion of sewing, and specifically sewing machines, and ended with Luna disassembling Rarity's sewing machine, interrogating Rarity on the inner workings of every mechanical assembly, and with Luna failing to reassemble the sewing machine, and leaving an apology and a large purse of bits for Rarity to summon a repair pony from the manufacturer. The mayor from the sewing machine company took one look at the pile of parts and recommended Rarity buy a new one, but she took the parts back to her depot as spares in exchange for a 5% discount. Luna then spent a night at the Cutie Mark Crusaders clubhouse. Wearing a new crimson cape, with a golden silk lining, Luna took the sleeping bag and sconed Crusader stories of her own Cutie Mark, and Celestia's, and the tales of monsters and pirates, wars and battles, hydras and ursas, and other monsters not seen by any living pony in centuries. The Crusaders didn't sleep that night, and barely slept the next night, huddling together in terror. However, the CMC's guardians found the 2 days of cowering terror quite relaxing. Visiting Sugar Cube Corner, Pinky taught Luna to bake cakes and pies, and Luna taught Pinky the 1,000-year-old lost art of flat fry bread. Luna wiped her eyes as she remembered similar times spent with her own mother, who had died while Luna was trapped on the moon, and to whom Luna had never said goodbye. Pinky needed a loaf of dough, and as the leavening puffed it up, Luna cried, "Witchcraft!" and blasted a loaf to the moon, the backblast of the spell leaving Pinky covered in char and grit. It took 3 weeks before a loaf of bread would stop spontaneously teleporting itself out of that kitchen. After a long, high-altitude flight, Luna and Rainbow Dash snuggled up together in a particularly soft cloud under the full moon, Dash sleeping peacefully and Luna with her eyes closed, luxuriating in the simple pleasure of being so near another pony as they shared their warmth against the late autumn cold. At the library, Luna and Twilight spent several nights huddled over ancient tomes, translating Ye Olde Ponish into modern, Twilight teaching Luna modern curse words, and Luna teaching Twilight the ancient. They laughed together, for the writers of the olden days were far less polite than modern merely discussing bodily functions, and romantic liaisons in languages that require giggling and blushing to translate. Spike covered his head with a pillow and tried to sleep. And then Luna made an exception, and spent a day, rather than a night, with Fluttershy. At the break of dawn, Luna carried a heavy burlap bag of birdseed from the storage shed, so that Fluttershy could refill her various feeders. Songbirds swirled around them, and Luna grinned, as Fluttershy fitted into the air and cavorted with her friends, before landing back on the ground and extending her wings. More than 24 birds alighted onto her, across her wings and down her spine, before Fluttershy walked them into the feeders to break their fast.
"Eat well, my friends,"
Fluttershy called in her tiny voice.
"You are too kind,"
Luna said, and used a hint of levitation to wipe the fresh bird droppings off Fluttershy's left wing.
"Oh, it's nothing, really,"
Fluttershy said. They returned the burlap sack to the shed, and Luna carried a second, heavier sack of fish food to the pond. Luna tried to calculate Fluttershy's possible income from her work, what with boarding and grooming the town's pets, and couldn't calculate a number that matched, much less exceeded what she spent in animal feed alone. Fluttershy scattered fish food about the pond, and then took a large pitcher of pond water back to her shed. Luna put the sack of fish food onto its shelf. Fluttershy, now wearing safety goggles and a lab coat, transferred water from the pitcher to several rack test tubes, and then dropped brightly colored chemicals from reagent flasks into the test tubes.
"What are you doing?"
Luna asked.
"Checking the water. With colder weather, the biological filter I've established might not be as efficient as it was over the summer. I need to monitor the pH, the ammonia, the nitrite and nitrate, as well as the general and carbonate hardnesses to keep my friends healthy and safe."
Luna nodded sagely, pretending that she understood so much as a single word of the explanation. Fluttershy glared at the test tubes.
"The pH is dropping and the carbonate is almost depleted."
She grabbed a scoopful of white powder from a barrel labeled buffer and flew over the pond, sprinkling the powder back and forth. Landing next to Luna and tucking her wings, Fluttershy said,
"There! That should keep the pond safe for a whole moon." "And? What next?"
Fluttershy grinned, and then looked down, hair falling over her face.
Just a few last morning feedings.
She grabbed a number of corn cobs from a bin and flew out the shed, towards the middle of her open grassy yard. On short poles were several wooden platforms, as she removed well-gnawed corn cobs from horizontal nails on the platforms, and replaced them with fresh corn cobs. Fluttershy landed next to Luna, as they watched the feeders from a distance. A ground squirrel hopped from the trees and sat on its haunches, sniffing the air. Shyly and carefully, he crossed the yard and climbed one of the posts to the platform and nibbled on the fresh corn.
And squirrel feeders too? You are indeed too kind to the woodland creatures, Fluttershy,
Luna said.
Oh,
Fluttershy replied with a dismissive flit of her wings.
it's not a squirrel feeder.
Luna raised an eyebrow.
But a squirrel is eating from it as we speak.
An ear-splitting shriek cut across the cottage's grounds. Feathers flashed and wings flared. A ruddy red-tailed shape stood from altitude. With a flash of talons and a rodent scream of pain and horror, the shape flapped heavily into the air, and then landed on one of the highest branches above the two ponies. Fluttershy looked up at the feeding shape and smiled.
It's a hawk feeder.
I have a feeling that Princess Luna freaked out just a little bit at that, because Fluttershy was the one to introduce it to her, not someone who you probably would expect. Anyways, let's get on to our Celestial and Lunar donators. Top donators: Peter Coulthard, J-Tin Man, Darkside, and Ponyman. CourierCruz CI, Strix, Zar630, Narwhals, TacoCat598, Rayden, Blackmoonheart, Dospo, Delta Omega, RuneScythe9852, Hunter Norman, Austin Roland, Lightning Blitz, Dash of Evergreen, Ryanie Dragonwolf, Secret Moon, Tal Rasha, The Toilet Snake, Sword Brethren Mordred, Ronin Wandering, Enderai63, Random Person Man Guy, Easy, Jack Edge, Skyochia, Leslie Prickett, Jordan Peterson, Crimson Kitten A9, Lightskin, Monster Kitty, Starlight Glimmer, Squiddy Boy, David E. Sanchez, Soul Dragon, Gaggy, Trey, Shadow Drake, Joe Piercy, Alex F., Rainbow Dash, Teal'ca Anderson, TV Killer, John Becker, Leon Reynolds, Raven Speedster, Zach Rakau, Mystery CU, Edgar Garcia, One Kingdom 1, Nissa Rusan, Vizuri, Dyslexic Character Sheets, Just a Random Boy, Hunter Plincart, A Crazy Person, Ponyman365, and Daniel Beck. Thank you all very much for watching this video, and live life to the fullest.